Good morning, everyone. My name is Tristan Noyes. I am the Executive Director of the Maine Grain Alliance, and we are so excited to bring you this conversation this morning. Uh, the Maine Grain Alliance is an organization that inspires and empowers people who are building regional grain economies. We're a community group of farmers, bakers, millers, maltsters, seed researchers, conservationists, academics, who are all coming together around this shared vision of how do we bring more local grains in our regional food system to our table through bread, through beer, through a whole variety of different ways. And our organization was founded way back in 2010 as a response to an event we held called the Kneading Conference, which was held in 2007 for the first time. It's now in its 19th year. I hope you'll be able to join us this summer, the last week of July, the 22nd through the 25th. We'll be having dozens of workshops with experts in all different fields to continue the kinds of conversations that we'll be having today, culminating in the Maine Artisan Bread Fair, which is always the last Saturday in July in Skowhegan. Our work encompasses seed restoration, which is taking handfuls of carefully kept seed from seed savers all across the country and bringing them to commercial viability based upon the varietals that work best for our unique growing conditions. We give out technical assistance grants, but in general, we serve as a thread that interconnects our community together, and that's what we're going to do some more today. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I encourage you to check out our website, become a member, and join us in the programming. We'll have more than 50 different events across this year alone. So there's something for everyone. With that, I want to pass it over to my friend Paul Polaro, who helps to oversee our work as part of our program with the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, a USDA grant that this talk is a part of. He'll talk a little bit about what to expect, how to ask questions at the end of this session, and introduce Jay for us. So, Paul, pass it to you.
Hey, I'm Paul Polaro, managing the top program for Maine Grain Alliance. And actually, our Seed Summit last year, another type of event we do, a farmer there had recommended Jay had his book, When Weeds Talk. And that farmer had a big issue with crabgrass, and he was telling me about how um, he's been managing it by kind of changing his soil. So we thought this topic would be right in line with the top goals, transition to organic, um, and reached out to Jay, and he's going to be doing about an hour-long presentation, sharing his screen, and then so we're going to hold questions till afterwards. You can feel free to throw them in the chat as you think of them. And then at the end of the hour, we'll read down. You can ask Jay your questions. So with that, I'll hand it off to Jay McCaman here. Share your screen and we can get started.
Oh, that's nice. You very good.
Thank you for the invitation to speak. I've spoken a few times over the years and tried to share what I have learned so it can help someone else. I grew up on my father was a block manager on a poultry farm for several years, and we grew tomatoes. And the common report was, we can eat these tomatoes, we can't eat those other, they're so acid, so what variety these? Well, Dad figured out it wasn't the variety, it was the way we treated soil. Rock phosphate, lime, and leaves. We couldn't put any chicken manure on the garden because it was too close to the barn, and that was the main breeding flock for that hatchery. We moved back to the dairy farm, and the dad would did the rock phosphate and lime on the hay fields, and he would say, where you been getting the hay from, boys? And we knew the cows were up on milk production. So that was kind of what we started from. And then after graduation from college, I took a job in a tractor dealership and did some farming. And one year I had some corn was late and it froze. So the next summer I was going to fit that ground for rye and took my chisel plow up there. And the chisel plow slid over the ground. It would not penetrate the ground. Well, I knew how well my dad had done. So I think I will transition to organic. And I did. And I will say right up front, it's best to solve some of your worst problems before you try to certify organic. You don't want to be strapped with limitations on what you can do when there's something organic doesn't allow, but it will really help the situation. Okay, what has happened? I had a potato grower said if he kept his calcium up, barnyard grass disappeared. Crabgrass has disappeared. Dock disappeared because of the biology in the soil. I put a heavy dose of biology on the soil and the dock disappeared. I mean, when I say disappeared, mostly disappeared. I won't say every plant was gone, but it would be a lot easier to control. Sandbergs disappeared when I got the humic acid working in the soil. Black nightshade disappeared when the fellow realized he was putting on too much potash. As he worked with it, he was able to totally control black nightshade with managing his potash very carefully. When he had to leave the farm, his brother went to the fertilizer company. Oh, you got to have all this potash. It brought the black nightshade right back. And that does happen. If you have success and then reverse, it can go backwards. I had ground ivy in the lawn and the calcium molasses reduced it. Had weeds in corn. And the client put 1/4 of the rate of atrazine, the herbicide, and calcium molasses cultivated once. And we could be happy with that weed control in that field. And then we had an organic grower on muck ground that put manganese on their soil and got rid of cans of thistle. And since then, I've said if we're dealing with rhizome type weeds, you want to check your manganese.
Hey Jay, I hate to interrupt. Can I ask a quick question? Do you have a deck that your slideshow that you'd like us to see? And if so, we can click the share button. If not, I just wanted to make sure that we're not seeing it right now. So I just wanted to ask.
We should be seeing it.
Okay, maybe let's try that really quick so that we can see if we can get that up. There should be a green button on the bottom that says share. And then you can select the window that has the presentation pulled up.
You're not getting them. You need the share button.
I wondered if something wasn't right.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
And then we can go to the slideshow and yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, let's back up.
We're going to go into the previous slide.
Right there.
Okay.
Thank
I'll
you.
run
So
through
sorry.
that again.
That looks great. Thank you, Jay.
I'll run through it quick. Barnyard grass disappeared when the calcium was adequate. Same with quackgrass. Dock disappeared when we put a heavy dose of biology. Sandburrs disappeared with humic acid. The sandburr cannot germinate when there's adequate humic acid in the soil. Black nightshade, which is a curse with the green bean or the dry bean growers. If you got too much potash, you can have black nightshade. If you manage it carefully, you can control it. Ground ivy was reduced with calcium molasses. Weeds in corn was was reduced with calcium molasses. Canada thistle disappeared with manganese.
He's making me feel extremely stressed out. Also,
Wild carrot, back. Wild carrot, you need a balanced soil. It's just plain misplaced or a messed up soil. Dandelion has a taproot that goes 3 feet deep. It's intended to bring up the calcium as leached. I had a client in asparagus that had milkweed, quackgrass, nutsedge, and some others that either disappeared or were greatly reduced just because he managed his soil. He was working with calcium and molasses and only very careful on potash. So it's a balanced living soil is the key. Chance from the Kabbalah, the Greek and Egyptian philosophers, they said chance is a name for which a law has not been recognized. And so you can't see that weeds are caused by chance. There is a cause, and we're trying to help you find that. Dr. Albrecht had a definition of weeds. Weeds are plants making scarcely more than vegetative growth on soils too low in fertility for other kinds of plant growth. Cattle, the weed is a plant that isn't of enough nutritional value in their judgment for them to eat it. Prairie grasses are weeds, cocklebur, dock, and other plants in abandoned field are choice nutrition. That came from a farmer that had corn in a field, and then his hired man had to go in the military during World War II, and the cattle would walk across the prairie grasses to feed on the weeds because they were getting more nutrition out of the weeds than they were out of the grasses. Anglo-Saxon, the word weed, W-E-O-D, means little herb. We consider herbs for helping with our health. All the same things follows with the soil. If you got weeds, the weed actually a weed is an herb to change that soil. There was a USDA report for corn pest management practiced in 1983. It said for every dollar spent on herbicides, you're getting $1.05 back. For insecticides, for $1 spent, you get $1.03 back. That was USDA data. Now, if you're paying 6% interest on your operating loan, you're losing money right at this front end. The bricks of the weeds compared with the bricks of the crop. Insects may eat the weed instead of the crop, and I've seen it happen. You had crop problem, the insects get in there because they're designed to eat the unfit production. But you get the bricks of the crop up, and then the insects will go to the weeds instead of the crop. Monsanto's had an ad several years ago, and if anyone can give me a copy of that ad, I sure appreciate it. Lasso does less soil damage to the soil than another herbicide. Caliber the weeds after herbicides. I had watched a neighbor. He passed away, and it was an odd-shaped field, and it had been continuous corn. So, because of an odd shape, you start the sprayer, and there's a area that's double application of herbicide. And that first year, there were no weeds where it had been double application for several years. In dry years, herbicides can come back to haunt you. I had a client that they had seeded alfalfa after corn. I think they skipped the herbicide that one year. And 1988, it was very dry, but the alfalfa was beautiful. 1989, the alfalfa was sick. And we traced it back to atrazine. We had a product that would break atrazine, and we applied it, and the alfalfa came back. And then a few years later, I was managing an organic orchard, and part of it was the old standard trees, a 30 by 30 spacing, or whatever it was. And we had a very dry year, and I could see the grass turning brown under those trees in the spray pattern. In fact, there was one place the tree was missing, and the herbicides came back and stunted that grass. So you may have to work on some situations to get those herbicides out of the way. And there are products available. Soil auxins can, or you could say soil hormones, can limit weed germination. If you have a good soil, it should be 4 to 6 weeks before the weeds germinate. A poor soil, they can be 1 to 2 days. They can be fast in the weed-prone environment. What do I look at in a soil test? I look at the percent base saturation. I spend very little time looking at soil pH. I look at that base saturation. I want potassium at 3 to 5%, magnesium 10 to 15%, maybe some sandy soils we crowded up closer to 20% because it'll hold more moisture. Calcium 67 to 72%. Small part of hydrogen and 1% of sodium. That's what my goal is when I try to make a recommendation from a soil test. What do you do for soil pH of lime? Of 5.9.
Okay.
How much lime do you apply for field crops? We'll look at some things before we determine what we do. The 3 to 5% potassium, that soil was 1.3%. Magnesium, 9.6%. We want 10 to 15. Calcium was 72.1. That's beautiful. Hydrogen, 17%. Hydrogen is the acid factor. What changes soil pH? Temperature, moisture. Dr. Held has told us that plant roots can change your soil pH from 7 all the way down to 4 if the nutrient that is needed is not available. Soil compaction can change their pH. The wrong lime can change the pH. How much lime to apply? And I know my voice is rough. No lime. There's plenty of calcium for what this soil will hold. Sulfamag was a better choice, and that was my recommendation. Sulfamag or K-mag. It's known by either name. Your succulents, purslane, it's your carbon. You get the carbon right in the soil, and I say carbon or organic matter, I use those terms interchangeably. But you got the carbon in the soil, the purslane is not going to stay around. Grass weeds. Look first at calcium and humus. The fine roots that are on the grass weeds are intended to loosen the soil. If the soil is too tight when the magnesium is too high. Calcium will loosen the soil, magnesium will tighten the soil. Ideally, a 7-to-1 calcium to magnesium ratio. And that's on a modified Morgan soil test, as Dr. Reams taught. Do not work the soil too wet. And Joe Scrimger told of a farmer in his area that had rain, and he went out to work the soil in the morning, and then he had to go to town for middle of forenoon. And when he came back, he went back to the field and started to work. And the name of the weed is slipping right now. I don't think it's broom sedge. I think it was something that's more common in this area. But that weed only grew where he worked the soil too wet. If you can make a mud ball in your hands and drop it and let it fall to the ground, and if it shatters, you're dry enough to work the ground. Gypsum, calcium sulfate, is a very common helper to solve the problem of soil being too tight. Come on, okay. Crabgrass. You got your calcium and you got some shade, the crabgrass can't grow. If you got a lawn and you have problems with crabgrass, definitely raise your lawnmower up, mow it 3.5 to 4 inches. My lawnmower is a set of 3.5 inches. That'll give enough shade so that the crabgrass can't grow. I had a spot in my lawn. I seeded a lawn and had a big maple tree. The maple tree gave enough shade that the crabgrass did not grow. The dandelion is a calcium collector. I had 3 fellows that put 800 pounds of potash on their alfalfa fields to get the big yield. They got a big yield, but the dandelions came back in. And excess potash is disturbing the dandelions. It's disturbing the calcium and making the calcium leach.
You know what?
Yeah.
Yes, honey. It's no fault.
I'm not hearing it.
Please continue. I think we had someone sign on. It was unmuted for a moment, so we just muted them.
Okay. The high potash on alfalfa, yeah, the yield did increase 25%, but the nitrogen or protein content decreased 25%. The phosphorus content in the forage decreased 40%. The calcium content decreased 64%. The feed salesmen like that because they sell a lot of mineral to make up for the imbalanced fertility on your hayfield. The one man put some liquid calcium on and he had a very marked reduction in dandelions. Sour grasses, your foxtail and fall panicum, it's the oxygen to carbon dioxide ratio in the soil. This relationship is directly related to calcium magnesium. If you have foxtail and the soil degenerates, the foxtail will start to disappear, fall panicum will come in. If you start doing some things right, the fall panicum will start to go away. The foxtail will come in. You keep on with that type of management, your foxtail will disappear also. Dr. Albrecht, Dr. Reams said your broadleaf weeds are related to your phosphate to potash ratio on the Morgan test. Most soil reports, they want a 1 to 2 phosphate to potash ratio. Now we've had consultants tell us that if you get a 1 to 8 to phosphate potash ratio, your herbicides are not going to work. You can say what you want, whether it's herbicide resistance or just plain a foul soil system that's caused that high potash. Excess manure can be the problem. Dr. Ream wanted a 2 to 1 phosphate to potash on most crops, 4 to 1 on alfalfa. And then you have high sugar content, and you can get rid of your alfalfa weevil. Lamb's quarter should be the last weed to disappear as you change your soil. Ragweed. The potassium is complex. Ragweed comes in usually when in a dry soil. Now I have it from medical personnel that if you have ragweed, you may be copper deficient. So you may have to work on your own health to supply your copper to help change your allergy to ragweed. Sandburrs, humic acid. I gotta blow my nose. When I made the organic transition, stopped the herbicides on rented ground to it was a mess. The sandburrs came in, and after 2 or 3 years for that management, I had a product that was an organic product and had some humic acid, humates and humic acid in it, and the sandburrs disappeared. I thought, well, maybe I did a better job of cultivating in the corn, but they disappeared out of the oats too, so that doesn't fit. And then I read, if you have sandburrs and you get your humic acid up where it should be, the sandburr cannot germinate. I've had 3 clients that have done it. They've got humic acid and eliminated sandburrs. And sandburrs are a real curse in asparagus because they spray in the spring to keep the crop clean. And then after harvest, they spray again to control it. So but thankfully, some of the guys are starting to think cover after harvest, you plant a cover crop to give you some protection. Another thing, if the soil is bare, and you get the soil too warm, you're killing your microbes. 110 degrees kill the microbes, and they've seen 110 degrees do it in the daytime, 80 degrees at night, 95 degrees, the microbes will die. Pore decay in residue. The velvet leaf needs methane in the soil. Jimson weed needs ethane, and they're products of pore decay in the soil. Maybe too much manure, maybe just a foul soil system that can't breathe. The soil may be anaerobic. I drove by a field and there was heavy velvet leaf. I had my truck window open. I could smell the velvet leaf from the road. And I looked, and the barn was right by that field. So that barn, that manure got a lot of manure applied to that soil. And water-based manure system can be a problem if you got that smell. There are ways to manage them so you don't have the smell, and it'll give you a better product to apply to your soil. The bind syndrome. There's been talk about syndromes. This syndrome in the medical community or that syndrome. Well, I came up with a bind syndrome. Beat your neighbor done. And probably the farmer that's been most afflicted with that has beat his neighbor done in bankruptcy court because he just plain didn't treat his soil right. Manage your soil, manage your carbon. Make sure you apply some liquid calcium every year. Gary Zimmer will say apply sulfur and boron every year to every field. If you apply boron, it'll help keep your calcium working. Boron and sulfur leach. So you need to apply every year. Seeds. They say seeds are the problem if your weeds are growing. Professor Beal at Michigan State University in 1879 placed seeds in containers and buried them with a plan to open one of those containers every 10 years and see what seeds grew. The broom sedge, the last container I heard of being open was 1991, and some of those seeds still grew. So you got to plan on them growing because they're in the soil if they get the right environment. Dr. Ulbeck talked about broom sedge. They had plots of Timothy, and some plots got 6 tons of manure every year. Some got nothing. And when the Timothy died out, the broom sedge came in. They tilled the soil and planted the Timothy again. The broom sedge weeds blew onto the plots that received the Timothy, but they did not grow. Compost versus raw manure can be a problem with these seeds growing. If you can compost your manure, you've got a method of reducing the raw manure. Microbes and other organisms will eat weed seeds, so you need to encourage your microbes. There's a book, Integrated Weed Management, that is very good. It covers a lot of content, but it does not say very much about soil fertility and our relationships there. Fallow soil is not resting. It is starving the microbes. And that came out of Acres USA, December of 2018. Fallow soil is not resting. It is starving the microbes. You got to have roots in the soil for that microbe to survive. Nature abhors barrenness. Dr. Richard Hirewood said, you want live roots in the soil 10 to 11 months a year. That's how to build organic matter. The eyes to acres ratio. That is important. Don't get so big you can't keep control of your acres. A potato grower in our area failed to harvest 40 acres of potatoes. This was about 35 years ago. So that figure of $1,500 an acre, $60,000, it should be more than double that at this time. So keep control of your operation. Confucius said, the best fertilizer is the footsteps of the farmer. That's not from the pickup window. You got to see your soil and see what's happening there. When I put out a fertilizer recommendation, some are not organic, some are. I do not say triple 16 fertilizer or specify analysis. Plants do not read fertilizer labels, but they sure do read the chemical and biochemical reactions in that soil. If I make a recommendation on commercial, I probably will use monoammonium phosphate, ammonium sulfate, sulfate of potash, and some of those combinations, but I don't say triple 16. You need to manage more than the NPK because you're in the non-profit kingdom. Hard pan. I've had some experience with that. My father had the first experience. First field to use a subsoiler. He wanted 6 feet apart on the rows, and part of the field, the wheat was up and down, up and down, up and down. You can follow the pattern of that subsoiler. It can be at any level below the deepest tillage. It can be caused by any tillage tool. We had a field that Dad had planted oats in the spring. He was milking cows and growing 5,000 broilers at a time. And so when he plowed for oats, the tractor was split in the plow pan, and that's all he could do. He couldn't try to solve the problem. When he got ready to break that field up for corn, we got the subsoiler, and Dad said, we're going to conquer that field. Well, we set that subsoiler down to 22 inches, and with 70 horsepower, 2 tractors, it stalled. Dad had to crank to raise the subsoiler, and then get on the tractor and jerk the clutch a few times to help it raise up. We subsoiled it 18 inches deep. When that field got seeded back to alfalfa, 100 bales the acre was no problem. Now, alfalfa people tell us alfalfa will grow, break hard pans. I think some it will, some it won't. And you'll have to use a tillage tool or some biology like AES, Energy Solutions digester. I built a tile probe, and one year we had 8.5 inches of rain in the month of September. And I went out in the probe in the field, and I'd get down 7.5, 8 inches, and I'd have to pound on it 3 or 4 times, and then the probe would drop another 10 inches. Well, I thought I needed the subsoil. No, I didn't. Just set my set my chisel plow deep enough to break that pan, and that will let those roots go down. Weed germination. Weeds germinate at 60-degree days, base 50. So you take your high temperature for the day, low temperature of the day, total, divide by 2, subtract 50. High temperature of 80 degrees, low temperature 60 degrees, that's 140. Subtract your 50, divide by 2, that's 20. 3 days, you've got weed germination. And that's why my man was using the first time Harold. We'll get to that in a minute. Mechanical weed control. Weeds you need to begin your weed control when the weeds are in the white. Once they turn green, there's chlorophyll and they're building energy in the roots for weeds survival. I have a weasel I use in my garden. I say it's a modified rotary hoe. There's 3 sections when I bought it. Most of the time I take the center section out and just try to move a little bit of soil into the row. I had a customer that had a fierce harrow. 5 days after planting, they would go in with the first harrow at a 30-degree angle to the row. They would get those weeds. What really helped, going at an angle to the row, they solved those clumps of soil that had built up because of the planter pass. I watched on the cultivator, when I watched the cultivator, the pod that was next to the row rolled on the small plant and killed it. But if you get that pod out of there so it's more uniform, your other implements can do a better job of controlling weeds. There are several other weed tools, tine weeders on the market, and I can't name the one. In fact, I don't have that cup in here that has that name on it. Rotary hoes are good. You need some speed to make a rotary hoe work. In fact, one time I cultivated and then came back with a rotary hoe just to see what it did. How it pushed a little more soil into the row. Cultivators. I like rolling shields or other shield systems that do very well. Just set them so you can control the grass and weeds that roll into the row. I like a narrow shovel, especially if you got a Danish tine. The Danish tine, well, if you're at over 4 miles an hour, you should be able to shake the grass out so it will dry out and die on the soil surface. I prefer sweeps on your broadleaf weeds. I'm sorry about the speech problem. Disc killers have a place to run. Now I'm gonna, if I can get that cursor. I can't get the cursor to show. Those would be the 2 shovels closest to the row on most cultivators. And I've watched when you have the shovel set that way, you can hill the weeds up along with your corn. If you can set them front and back, maybe 3 or 4 inches, you tip the weed out with that lead shovel, and you have a better job of covering the weed with that back shovel. I had a client that was using a John Deere cultivator. He broke a shank, so he had an international cultivator, and he grabbed a shank off of there and set it up. And that's just what happened when he changed the shanks, and he could see it happen right as I was trying to explain. MoCal, liquid calcium molasses. And I will say, Agri-Energy Solutions tells me they don't want to ship a 50-50 ratio because of handling problems with some pumps. I had no problem. The only time I had problem was I had the molasses delivery came before the calcium. So the molasses was on the bottom, and I had 3 pumps that would not move that blend that calcium molasses. Then I had the idea. I figured God gave me the idea, blow air through it. So I built a tool that I could run on right on the bottom of the tank, and I've used it many times when I had products that separate. I can mix them, and stir them up and mix them, and they will work. And Agri-Energy says not to use 50-50 ratio. Use something else that's thinner. And I have one client right now that's talking about just increasing the calcium, like a 55-45. If you're going to apply that, plan to apply it within 24 hours of planting. You're creating an energy pattern on that soil surface that will suppress the weed growth. Night tillage. Prevent the seeds in the soil from exposure to light. So you go out with a tillage tool, you got dust flying, but the sun penetrates that dust, it triggers that germination of that weed. So that's when you can use tillage in that situation. When you got perennial weeds, mow before seeds set. The root energy is low at the time of seed set, and if you mow them, then you may have to do it more than once. You can soon get that energy down where it does not want to grow. I saw the Bruce Stout movie, The No Work Garden. So I did not use my plant to plant those potatoes. I just laid them on the ground and rolled a bale of hay over them. It worked great, except right on the edge of the row, you have some weeds because it's not a uniform edge. The light can penetrate and get those weeds growing. But that's a possibility. That's what happened. And it's a little harder to dig the potatoes because you don't know how they're spreading. Glyphosate has an antibiotic, and that's a number if you're interested. And I feel that is why the honeybees are having problems. The honeybee has one bacteria in the digestive tract it has to have to survive. If an antibiotic is used, that will kill the bees. Glyphosate was first patented to clean steam pipes. After the junk that builds up on the inside of the pipe will build up and interfere with the efficiency of heat movement. The second antibiotic was as a herbicide. And I just had a train of thought fell. Now, you might want to write this down, the potassium paradox. I'll leave it up here for a minute. I've gotten a lot of information at TINYURL.com. K32MSG9. And you can get some information on potassium management. When I managed the organic orchard, they were telling us that you apply calcium first because that calcium determines the number of cells in the plant or in the apple. Potassium determines the size. So you want to figure at least part of your potassium going on closer to maturity because potassium controls the size and the maturity of the fruit. Agri-Energy Solutions has some groundwork newsletters, April 22nd and April 25th, 2014. If you can get on that site, you can get some information. In fact, there's a lot of newsletters on there. You can get a lot of information. I've been with that company better than 20 years. They're my main supplier for soil products, biologicals, and other things. Okay, when weeds talk. This is the book I've written. I get $30 for it. I guess I can't make it work. Well, maybe I'll try it. See if it.
We also have the link to the book in the chat here if anyone wants to look at that.
I can't get it to show, but there's quite a bit of text, 145 pages. There's over 800 weeds in that table, and that has the table is laid out across 2 pages. So you take the weed, low calcium, high potash, high magnesium, low phosphorus, low organic matter, anaerobic soil. You can go across the whole list. And then there's several pages of other details. And there's a section that has the scientific name that you can trace over to common names. And I have a few cases that there are 10 different common names associated with a particular scientific name. So if you don't find what you're looking for, try to track it down from the scientific names and look back for other common names. And then one of the most common books I used for weed identification, Weeds of the North Central States, North Central Region Research Publication number 281, Bulletin 772, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So I used that for that my weed identification. I had to get a lot of other books too for other areas of the country because it's just the way the country is. Okay, I guess we're ready for some questions.
Yeah, we'll open to questions here. Feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. Any specific weeds that have been affecting you? This would be a good time to ask Jay what that might mean about the soil. And I also wanted to ask, thinking of weeds as messengers on soil conditions, is there a certain threshold of, how prevalent those weeds are in the field that would, like that's the moment to act? If there's a lot of weeds, but they're pretty diverse, you get mixed signals there. At what point does the message become clear with a certain weed taking over?
The only thing I have in that line would be germination. If you can germinate, get control when the weeds germinate. I'm not aware of anything that would fit that question.
We got one question about bindweed and thistle.
I would, a thistle, I know manganese, if there's rhizomes, if they're a rhizome type weed, you want the manganese working. And glyphosate is a chelator. It binds minerals. And if you have if you're using every herbicide, according to Dr. Don Huber, every herbicide affects mineral availability. Glyphosate is the worst. So you need, especially trace minerals, you probably need to apply a little bit more if you're using glyphosate. Other weeds use some. If you can figure out what that weed is the relationship there, work with that to make sure you got your nutrition right, so you got a healthy plant. I'm reading one of Dr. Albrecht's books, and he's talking a lot about the minerals, and there's so many different areas that our minerals affect so many different things, and it's been an interesting book. Acres USA, Charlie Walters walked into Dr. Albrecht's office. The University of Missouri had been bought off by the chemical companies to retire Dr. Albrecht, because he was telling farmers how to manage their soils so they had fewer problems. And Charlie Walters walked into Dr. Albrecht's office when he was cleaning out his files, and Charlie was able to retrieve those papers he'd written over the years, and he's put that into a series of 8 books of about 300 pages each of the papers that Dr. Albrecht wrote. So go to acresusa.com and look up your book list. I'm in the process of, if the next book I want is on sale, I'll buy it.
We also had oops, an alarm there. One grain plot that we were growing was borderline infested with pigweed. The soil was really heavy clay. What I think you had mentioned pigweed earlier. Could you go back and say what might be the indicator there? Is it soil nutrition?
Broadleaf weeds, you get your ratios right. As I said, most of agriculture is 1 to 2 phosphate to potash ratio. If you've got something like I mentioned, the 1 to 8 phosphate to potash ratio, you can forget herbicides controlling those weeds. You got to work with your calcium magnesium ratio to get the air in the soil, work your phosphate to potash ratio to get the right ratios there, so your soil can function like it should.
We have a question. Could you repeat the Charlie Albright's, what was his book called?
What was that?
You had mentioned a book by Charlie Albright. Oh, somebody wanted to know what the title of the book was.
William Albrecht. There are 8 books. I don't have the one here I'm reading right now, but there are 8 different books. If you look up Albrecht, you'll find it.
All right, do we have any other questions for Jay?
Okay, my daughter, the one I'm reading right now is Albrecht's Enduring Vision. Okay, yeah.
Perfect.
We'll link to that in the chat. And we also have linked a lot of the other pieces and works that you've mentioned over the course of the talk, Jay, including Weeds of North Central States. There's an actual virtual version of it, a scanned version online that folks can access. Some descriptions of some of the cultivation tools and others. So if you haven't checked out the chat links, please go to that. And please feel free to unmute. And if you have a few questions for Jay, don't hesitate to ask. Jay, I have one actually. I was particularly interested in the night cultivation, and I'm wondering if you have any practical tips on how best to execute that. Um,
Well, I would say no lights on the back of the tractor. You probably better have something on the front so you can drive the right direction, but no lights on the back of the tractor.
That's good to know. Yeah.
You might want to wait for a new moon as well.
Yeah.
There's a question. Can we hear some insight on the best ways to oxygenate soils without tillage?
Biologicals, you get a good agri-energy. I will say this, I don't want to put a lot of effort on agri-energy solutions, but they have spent almost 40 years developing. It started out as SP1. They've changed it now. The new name is bioenergy, and they have figured out what combinations of biologicals work together and what don't. And there's a lot of biologicals on the market now, and many of those are one or two materials, one or two species. Agri-energy has had the experience that say they can tell us this one works. You can work with these 3, or you can work with these 10, but this one does not work with another one. So I figure they've solved that situation, and you can be confident that they have the experience. They're putting out a good product, not just something to get on the market. I appreciate what other people are doing, but I want to direct you to where we can find the best, what I feel are the best products.
And what about cover crop, like tillage radish, just to aerate the soil, loosen it up?
Yep. Yep.
Would you recommend, there's a lot of talk about uh, cover crop blends, mixing multiple species together.
Yep.
Are there any, combinations that work well on the oxygenation aeration front? Or
That
the
is
weed
one
management?
thing, as I have read, the best thing is work with the combinations within your work in your soil. I will say one thing about rye. I'm just a little ways north of Grand Rapids, Michigan, so we're about 110 miles up the state line. And 5th of December, I had rye in the grain drill, and I went out and run it over the garden for just, I had to get it out of the drill because the mice would get into it. End of February, the snow went off, and I went out and looked, and I had rye over 1 inch high, the end of February, and I planted it the 5th of December. And of course, now I'm hearing that rye will germinate and grow at 34 degrees. So don't be afraid of rye when the soil's cold. Other than that, uh, everything I'm reading, you with combinations, if you want to start, I would say start with a simple combination and then see what happens. I think there's benefit for multiple combinations because there's just so much variability in our soils, and what works for you might not be the best combination for your neighbor.
Now, a lot of this, I think what did you said? NPK was nonprofit kingdom
Right.
was that was pretty popular. And you mentioned a lot about micronutrients, and are those micronutrients found more in deeper layers of soil? Could the heritage grains have deeper roots? Could adding in a deeper rooted crop into the rotation bring some of those micronutrients back to the surface of the soil?
Yes. Well, uh, calcium with the dandelion, the 3 foot taproot on dandelion, that brings that calcium back up. That's the reason the dandelion is there. The only place I have serious dandelion problems is uh, uh, part of the yard is a gravel base, and so the dandelion, I'm not going to get rid of it very easy in that area. But I've got heavy soil,
Talk
especially in my garden.
Talking about calcium and tap roots, I know a number of farmers in northern Maine will rotate with sunflowers to get that longer tap root to bring some of those nutrients up to the top. Phil was wondering about, he heard you say applying calcium every year. Is there a recommended general amount, and where would you recommend getting the calcium from?
2 gallons is very common, and AgriEnergy has 2 calcium products, and one is approved for organic. AgriEnergy Resources is the company is Princeton, Illinois.
Great. We've linked, I think, somewhere up above to their site as well in their newsletters.
Yeah, and they've got many years of newsletters on that site if you want to go back and do the research.
Great. So, if we have any other questions, put them in the chat. All right. Well, thank you, Jay, for coming. And if anybody wants a copy of the slides, send me an email. It's paul@maingrains.com. Put it in the chat here.
I think we'll just plan to
And
send
we've
it out
also
to
recorded a
everyone.
recording as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll try to put both of those things in an email to send out to everybody who registered, even for those who weren't able to join us live.
And then we also have the Organic Grain and Seed Summit coming up in April. So there is a link up in the chat here too to sign up for that. There'll be a full day of workshops for organic grain growers, covering some similar topics.
Hey, Paul, this is
And
Tom.
we've got one more question about Bermuda grass. Any notes on Bermuda grass, what that might say about the soil and how to manage it in a vegetable garden?
Bermuda grass, I better get the book out. Bermuda grass has got a lot of lows. Calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, high sulfate, low humus, low porosity, which would make it a tight soil. Anaerobic, high moisture, probably some hard pan, sticky soil.
We also just noticed that the link to that I was sending for the registration for the Seed Summit is linking to our last year's event. So we'll update that link and we'll also send out a registration for the current form to sign up for the 2026 Organic Grain and Seed Summit. Thanks for sharing that, folks.
I'll put it in right now. I think that might have been a link to this one. Let's see here. Yeah, Seed Summit 2026. So I got the link coming. There we go. There's a link to the Seed Summit. Great. Well, thank you, Jay, for coming, and thank you everyone else for coming as well. And yeah, that was really great.
Well, I'm glad I could share something that will help somebody.
Absolutely.
Helps us immensely. Thank you so much. It was so informative, so many
Sure.
things to go and lots of reading to do. So will everyone go out and buy Jay's book also so that we can reference this at home more easily?
I'll tell you what happened on that book. I sell it for $30. Acres was selling for 40. Amazon was selling for $67.99.
Oh my
So if you want
gosh.
to pay the high price, go to Amazon.
Let's see if we can avoid that, huh?
But Acres carries a lot of books.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us. Again, we'll update the link on the previous. You can go to theneedingconference.com and you'll see the updated information for all of our sessions coming up in April. We've just updated that page also, so that link is clicking through to the right 2026 event. And we'll see you as soon. We have an ongoing series of Organic Grain Expert office hours that we'll be hosting over the course of the next 9 months. So we'll have as many as 12 more of these workshops and organic grain and expert hours, the Organic Grain Seed Summit. Any farmers that are with us, please email us because you can attend the Kneading Conference for free this year by virtue of our relationship with the USDA's Transition to Organic Partnership Program grant. That's the last week of July, and we'll have 7 different sessions, all geared toward organic grain growing and free for everyone to come, including meals. So we'll hope you'll be able to join us then. But in the meantime, stay in touch, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll have more content and more conversations on the way really soon. Thank you all.